Webinar, Adapting Indigenous Engagement Strategies in Mine Site Remediation, brought to you by CIM Magazine and the Saskatchewan Research Council. I am your organizer, Michelle Beacom, Managing Editor of CIM Magazine. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you joined by computer, please make sure you've selected the computer audio button. If you joined by phone, please make sure you've selected the phone button. And if you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box on your GoToWebinar control panel. And now I will, the questions will be held until the end at the Q&A period. Now I'll go over to giving you today's presenters. We have Skye Muirhead. She is Director of SRC's Environmental Remediation Team. Skye has nearly 20 years of environmental remediation experience. A large part of her career at SRC has been on Project CLEANS, which stands for the Cleanup of Abandoned Northern Mine Sites, a legacy uranium mine site remediation project. We also have with us Alexei Klasztorin. Alexei is a senior environmental scientist. He is a senior environmental scientist, environmental remediation at SRC, and he also works on Project CLEANS. Alexei has over 35 years of experience in academic and applied studies of radionuclides and other environmental contaminants. And before coming to SRC, he has done work with the International Atomic Energy Agency mission to Fukushima and research related to the Chernobyl nuclear accident. Now, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Skye to start the presentation.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us and for your interest in our project. My name is Skye, and I'm with my coworker Alexei, and we're going to be discussing how our team has approached Indigenous engagement strategies and inclusion strategies throughout the mine site remediation lifecycle. I'd like to start with an acknowledgement that our virtual meeting includes those of us meeting together on Treaty 6 territory and the ancestral homeland of the Métis. We extend our gratitude to the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis ancestors of this land and reaffirm our enduring connection with one another. SRC acknowledges that for the CLEANS project, we operate and work with the people of Treaty 8 and 10 territory, homeland of the Dene and Métis. So just to give you a bit of a agenda on where we're going to go today, we're going to be discussing an overview of Project CLEANS, which includes 37 sites. And then we're going to dive into the second largest site, Lorado Mill. And we're going to break it apart by each of the project phases. And through each project phase, we'll give some history on the site and the remediation stage. And then we'll also discuss how SRC adapted Indigenous engagement and inclusion strategies throughout the life cycle of the project. And if you're not familiar with SRC, we are Canada's second largest research and technology organization. We're a Treasury Board Crown Corporation, and we receive a portion of our funding from the government, with the remainder of our work from contract research and fee-for-service work. The team that Alexei and I work with, we recently changed our name. We used to be called the Environmental Remediation Team. Now we're Environmental Performance, Sustainability, and Climate. And each of these areas of expertise have supported Project CLEANS, but the main one is the Mine Closure and Environmental Remediation Group. So like Michelle said, Project CLEANS stands for the Cleanup of Abandoned Northern Sites. SRC has been managing this for about 20 years now. The project is a multi-year, multi-million-dollar project to assess and remediate 37 abandoned uranium mine and mill sites in northern Saskatchewan. I've got a map coming up, so I'll show you in the next slide. But our largest site is Gunner. Our second largest site is Lorado, which is the one we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about today. And then we have 35 mine and exploration sites that we collectively refer to as the satellite sites. So I can show you with my cursor here in the northwest corner of Saskatchewan, this area here, if we zoom in a little bit, the majority of our sites are located in and around Lake Athabasca. Each of these little red dots represents a site. Right here on this black star, you can see where Uranium City is located. Laredo's boundary is outlined in red here, and this is the site we're going to be talking about. And then Gunner is located over here. It's our largest site out on the Cracking Stone Peninsula. And we also have 2 sites located closer to Lorado. So like I said, SRC has been managing on behalf of, well, actually, I've said we were managing, but we are managing on behalf of the Saskatchewan Ministry of Energy and Resources. And we've been doing this for the last 20 years. In this role, we act as project manager, we hold the C&SC license, and we are the designated agent to manage and undertake the assessment process. We hold and coordinate and comply with all the regulatory license and approval processes. We are responsible for all of the project planning and remote logistics management. We implement the remediation activities, and some of this is within our team. Some of this requires procurement and contracts for consultants or contractors. We do extensive site and environmental monitoring, and one of the main focuses that we're going to discuss today is the community engagement and inclusion piece. So the main rights holders and stakeholders involved in Project Cleans are located within the Athabasca Basin in the northern section of Saskatchewan and a little bit into Alberta. In the Athabasca Basin in Saskatchewan, there are 7 communities, and there's 1 community in Alberta that we regularly engage with. SRC's approach for the entirety of the project has been to try to engage early and often, to be as transparent as we can and inclusive as we can. And our main goal is to develop relationships and build trust and maintain that trust with rights holders and stakeholders throughout the project. During the course of the project work, we have held over 275 meetings and workshops, both in the communities and in Saskatoon. We've hosted more than 35 site tours with local community members, local leaders, and representatives. There's been a variety of educational and training opportunities that have been included in the project. Our communication tools vary. You can see a broad list here, trying to provide information to each person where they might find it. And then to manage the length of the project's large amount of data, we developed a data management platform that we realized we could leverage as a communication tool as well. So on the right, you can see a picture of a gamma survey. Our sites are impacted by radiation with various things like tailings and waste rock. And we do gamma surveys to understand where there are exceedances and what needs to be remediated. And to communicate how, what the site's hazard and risk levels are and the progress we've made. This is an example, this is a video we showed at a community meeting a couple of years ago, I think, that shows gamma over time. So everything in pink and yellow is an exceedance, and everything in blue and green meets regulatory requirements. And you can see over time where we started covering those hotspots, and you can see in the pink and yellow bits where we still have left to finish. So this is a really quick, easy way to show community members what progress we've made at the site and what we still have left to do. And I'm going to hand it over to Alexi right away, but I just wanted to frame out what we include in phase one, which is the assessment phase. So phase one includes the initial site assessments. Alexi will get into this, but the sites were abandoned in the 1960s, and then SRC became involved 20 years later. So we needed to determine what was going on at the site, what the hazards were, etc. Phase one includes the environmental impact assessment for Lorado. Not every site at Project Cleans required one, but Lorado did. It also includes the remediation design, which there were multiple options looked at, as well as all of the regulatory approvals along the way. So I will hand this over to Alexi now.
Good morning, everybody. I'll start with some background information about the site. And Lorado Uranium Mill site is located about 8 kilometers south of Uranium City. The mill was operated from 1957 to 1960 and processed about 300,000 tons of ore from surrounding uranium mines. It generated up to 300,000 cubic meters of unconfined radioactive acidic tailings with a total area of over 20 hectares. Tailings and highly acidic mill process water were deposited near and in the neighboring Narrow Lake, which caused high acidity in the lake within pH 3.5 to 4 in the lake. The infrastructure was dismantled in the 1990s, but all the buildings and other structures had contained asbestos materials, which remained in some residual debris. Next slide, please. So the unattended mill footprint posed multiple physical hazards to public visitors, like metal and concrete debris, sinkholes, etc. Well, health and environmental risks included exposure to asbestos-containing material, exposure to ambient radiation from the tailings, which was up to 20 microsieverts per hour, which is more than 100,000 times more than the background, and inhalation of radionuclides and trace metals from the tailings dust, and increased acidity and metals in the Narrow Lake, which became completely dead at that time. Next slide, please. Yeah, it takes time for the slides to appear. Okay, so here is how the site looked in 2013, just before the remediation began. The image shows that the former mill footprint and radioactive tailings and the highly acidic, biologically dead Narrow Lake on the in the back of the slide. So you can see the photo of the extent damage of over the landscape. So the tailings were on the side of the highway, which is in the middle of the slide, and followed out past the shoreline. So there was sulfur used in the process, and some was scattered about the mill footprint. And there was mill debris left behind, barrels, steel, wood, and garbage from the mill. So the original area of the tailings outlined in the environmental impact assessment was about 14 hectares. Once we started working, we found that the tailings extended a bit further than it is visible, and we had to build the tailings cover a bit further out, so it would blend into the surrounding landscape. So the total area of the cover, well, that we built now is more than it's shown on the slide, and it's about 24 hectares. So the next slide, please. So the remediation objectives were to allow for safe travel and traditional land use, reduce physical safety risks, reduce environmental risks to the receiving environment, reduce the radiation exposure, and follow up with the ALRA principle as low as reasonably achievable, comply with federal and provincial regulations, support local sustainable development, and of course be implemented through cost-effective and efficient project management. And yeah, I think the Sky will follow up with further presentation slides.
Yeah, thanks, Alexi. So in phase one, the initial efforts focused on identifying the rights holders and stakeholders that would be in the Athabasca Basin and interested or impacted by the project. The main way that we tried to start engagement was by going into the communities as much as we could. And when we went into the communities, we tried to bring the right people. And I'll try and speak to how that changed throughout the project. So in phase one, obviously we brought our project team. Alexi and I have both been project managers at one point or another. Alexi is the project manager of Lorado Mill right now. And so we brought our core team members for the project management from SRC. In phase one, actually throughout all of the phases, we've been bringing the regulators with us when they're available to join. We find that it helps lead to better transparency, because when people are asking questions, they can see the regulators listening, and sometimes the regulators respond as well. And then for phase one in particular, we mainly brought consultants with us. So if there was a skill set or a special area that needed to be studied, or the engineers who were doing the design options, we would bring that group as well as a broader team to make sure that everyone is in the room, that if there was a question asked, that ideally we had someone there that could answer that. What we discussed during those tours, we started with a site overview, trying to introduce people to the sites themselves. We discussed the project objectives to make sure that people understood what SRC was hired to do, who SRC was, how we fit into the project, and kind of what set expectations on what the project was aiming to achieve. We also spent quite some time discussing the historical or legacy site hazards and the risks associated with those. And then as we progressed through the stages, because phase one lasted for, I don't know, approximately a little over 10 years, we would present on the site assessments and the information we gathered, and then once those were finalized, the remediation design options, those were discussed through multiple workshops where input and ideas were gathered. And during the site assessment phase, I'll touch on this in the next slide, or in a little bit actually, but we tried to include Indigenous traditional knowledge where the communities wanted to participate. So at Lorado, we started discussing the hazards and risks of the site around 2008. And there was a lot of, there's varied feedback that we got, both from Indigenous and non-Indigenous community members, and also from leadership. So there was consensus that any of the legacy debris, mill footprint, should be disposed of properly. There was a desire to see an elimination of the tailings related risks, or a reduction if we can fully eliminate. While discussing remediation options, there were multiple options discussed on how we could remediate, and some of those mentioned were cost prohibitive, but included things like removing the tailings from the site, However, that could lead, the concern was that would lead to a significant release of contaminants. These sites had been stable and sitting for a long time, and that would really stir things up. So the communities, they said that they did not want us disturbing those tailings. They wanted to, they did not want the tailings shipped off site. They wanted them dealt with there. And then, like Alexi said, the water quality near lake was not good. So requests for, yes, let's improve the water quality in that lake. We also saw feedback related to employment and business and training opportunities. People were interested in participating. We also heard an emphasis on protecting the public and any workers at the site throughout all of the project phases. And one of the things that was concerning, especially the local community of Uranium City, the most was the tailings related dust, and they wanted that dealt with immediately. So we started a dust monitoring program in 2011, which was prior to actual remediation. Remediation occurred during 2014 and 2015, and we continued this monitoring until 2017. We had there's snow fences, there was dust suppression, both EK35 and water, and we had residents participate in the sampling program. And each year when we did our community tour, we presented on the results of the dust monitoring program, and we only discontinued it in 2017, which was 2 years after remediation, once the communities felt like the risks and hazards had been addressed. And I apologize for like the just gigantic amount of text on this, but essentially there's many, many ways that you can include Indigenous traditional knowledge in phase 1 of a mine remediation. At Lorado, we did land use and site occupation surveys during the assessment phase, traditional food studies to understand what people were eating in the area, knowledge gaps for legacy sites. There were people whose parents had worked at the mine sites, and they were able to provide us with photos that showed where old tanks would have been, things like that. So we were able to fill in knowledge gaps through that knowledge gained by the communities. And then in the remediation design and risk management stage, there's a lot of Indigenous traditional knowledge that we were able to include, things like future land use planning, how the communities saw themselves using the land in the future, or how it, how they might be using it. This allowed us to set exposure limits in alignment with those rights holders and stakeholders' expectations, as well as regulatory limits. And I'll get into the revegetation one in like a mini case study in a little bit. And so before I hand it back to Alexi to talk about what we did for remediation in Lorado, I'll just frame out what's included in the phase 2 portion of the project. This is where we did procurement for a major contractor to implement the design work. It's where we did water treatment, where we built the cover for the tailings, where we built the tailings cover, and all regulatory approvals and the as-built after. Alexi, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Sky. So here is our approach to the Lorado site remediation, which follows a common standard for projects of this type. During the site assessment phase, all site-related hazards were evaluated and potential corrective options were analyzed and discussed with the stakeholders and right holders, as Sky just presented. The integrated engineering solution included cleanup of the mill footprint and adjacent areas, treatment of near lake through liming, and construction of an engineered cover over the tailings to reduce radiation exposure and prevent wind dispersion of fine tailings particles. Next slide, please. So let's start from near lake water treatment. So the lake has an area of about 1.7 square kilometers and a volume of approximately 11 million cubic meters. In 2013, the lake water had a pH of 3.5 to 4.5 and contained elevated concentrations of aluminum, trace metals, and radionuclides leached from the tailings, because part of the tailings actually was submerged in the water. To improve water quality, the lake was treated with lime in 2014, and the resulting slurry was returned to the lake. So in total, it was about 400 tons of lime that were applied for water treatment. The treatment increased the pH of water in the lake to approximately 8, which is very impressive, taking into account that it was 3.5. And it caused aluminum and other contaminants to precipitate. Next slide, please. So the tailings cover was constructed using local sand and gravel materials. The convex landform design ensures effective drainage by directing runoff from the upland central portions of the cover towards the surrounding drainage dishes, as it's shown on the slide, and that's how it looked like during the cover construction. Next slide, please. So the cover also included approximately 1 meter of the so-called capillary break material inside the tailings thickness, inside the cover thickness, to prevent contaminated tailings pore water from reaching the cover surface. Also, a riprap was placed along the waterline to protect the cover from the wave action and ice erosion during winter time. Next slide, please.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's your turn.
Yeah, so Alexi went over what we did for the remediation of Lorado Mill and Narrow Lake. And during phase 2, our strategies around engagement and inclusion really shifted. The core pieces stayed the same. We still communicated with the same tools and methods. We still did tours. We still held workshops, but what the content of those had shifted. So for phase 2, the main focus was on opportunities for the Indigenous and non-Indigenous Athabasca Basin community members. We also, when we did the community tours, we continued to bring the core project team and the regulators, but we started to bring the contractor, and actually the contractor did their own additional separate recruitment tour through the communities with the idea that anyone who was interested in what the work would be like or questions about potential training opportunities could come and meet the contractors and hand their resumes over in person, or help fill out other pieces that they hadn't thought might be applicable. And we found that really helped with increasing the amount of people we were able to include in the project. In the next slide, I'll get into it a little bit more, but we also worked with the Prince Albert Grand Council when we were developing the scope for the request for proposal. So before we hired the major contractor, to try and figure out how we could ensure or try to ensure that we would be offering the most inclusive remediation project that we could. So how do we include equipment from the basin? How do people from the basin get work on the project? How do we encourage the contractor to spend money in the region? So we connected with Prince Albert Grand Council, and they suggested a representative from PAGC join the procurement team with SRC, and they helped develop the RFP scope with us, and the metrics that we had included in the RFP were suggested to the contractors. And then when we received proposals, this representative also participated in as the part of the team of the procurement selection. So in this way, we were able to encourage higher targets, and you can see in the table below the successful proponents included 51% target of Athabasca Basin Indigenous person inclusion, a target of 55% Athabasca Basin heavy equipment utilization, and a target of 32% Athabasca Basin regional spend, all of which were either met or exceeded. So we were really happy with those results and felt like we were able to include the communities, not just in Uranium City, but like across the Athabasca Basin, with whoever was interested. The contractor also provided training in construction safety, equipment operation, and they facilitated provincial driver's license testing. And we submitted the project and won an award for this approach to procurement and engagement, which was really exciting. So including Indigenous traditional knowledge in the remediation stage, it looks a little bit different than in the assessment stage. During remediation operations, one of the really helpful things that occurred for Lorado was some locals suggested where we might look for local aggregate sources for the boro material we needed to build the clean soil cover, which if anyone's been in the Athabasca Basin region, you know it's difficult to find large volumes of sand. So that was really helpful. And then there was some access routes that were suggested, which was also really helpful. For cultural monitoring, we actually brought in elders from different communities and invited them to come while the work was happening, to come and see the site and see how we were protecting the workers from any radiation risks, and to talk to the people from their communities and just provide a connection from home, because it ended up, it was away from home when they were doing their shift, and it allowed that connection to remain. So I'm going to do a tiny case study on the revegetation. So we were able to, I will step back. We were required to clear vegetation on the outside of the tailings area, like Alexi said, which made the area a little bit bigger than what you saw in the picture. And then we had to build a clean soil cover over top of that, which left a significant disturbance or like open cleared area. And some ecosystems can recover after a disturbance like that just on their own. Some recover quickly and some take years. So we wanted to make sure that we were protecting the cover from erosion and trying to move the site back into something that looked a little bit more natural as quickly as possible. So we needed a little bit of assistance. And this is where our revegetation project came in. Initially, during the design phase, things like geosynthetic material within the cover system was considered, or bringing up hydroseeding equipment, which is something that you would see commonly around like a big highways build where there's like steep ditches. Both of those are controllable, good methods of erosion control, but we were working in a really remote area. There's no road access. Everything had to be either flown in or shipped in over an ice road. And like Alexi said, one of the project objectives was being cost effective. And we also had to ensure that we didn't have any invasive species in the seed mix that we used. So SRC started out with laboratory and scientific field studies to determine the best revegetation method. So we looked at varying mixtures of seed mix and amendment options, and did cost benefit analysis for each. We then took this information and we hosted a series of workshops with Athabasca Basin elders, and were able to co-develop the final seed mixture with their input. So during the workshops, the vegetation experts from SRC presented the potential species we had considered and kind of the results of our studies. And then the Indigenous knowledge holders provided information on which of those established the fastest, which provided the most long-term surface coverage, what would be the expectation for long-term plant succession. They also provided information on how to best plant the species, where species would do best, so like slope, shade, wet areas, non-wet areas, and what what areas would need to be seeded and what areas could be left with a little bit less, and it would kind of grow in a little bit more quickly naturally. And the results, as you can see, are a successfully revegetated gamma cover. It saved the project a lot of money not having to use something like a hydroseeder and shipping it up and going through that method. And it also built out a more robust and a cover system that was closer to naturally occurring vegetation in the area. So yes, before I hand it back to Alexi for the phase 3 section he's going to cover, in phase 3, which is the transitional monitoring and maintenance phase, this includes the development and implementation of the monitoring and maintenance phase, as well as the regulatory approvals of both. And it also includes the application into the institutional control program. So SRC is involved in phase 1, 2, and 3 of this project. And once the site has been deemed safe and stable through the monitoring program, we will apply to CNSC to have the license revoked, and the province, the Ministry of Energy and Resources, manages the institutional control program, which is a program where it will care for these sites with monitoring and maintenance as needed into perpetuity. So that is the goal of the project and is included in phase 3. Alexi, over to you.
Okay, so we provided the transitional monitoring has been initiated and conducted since 2016, where the remediation and revegetation was completed, and it's the main with the intention to confirm that the remediation was successful and that the site remains stable over the long term. We monitor water quality in Mirror Lake, also the integrity of the tailings cover, including signs of erosion, slumping, and surface condition, vegetation development, and other environmental indicators. Air monitoring was recently discontinued because the results consistently demonstrated that dust and radon gas no longer pose any risk. Monitoring will continue until the site is stable in all respects. And to date, which is over 10 years since we completed the remediation, to date, the follow-up monitoring has been ongoing with the community members assisting in the program. And also the community were informed regularly about the monitoring results. The next slide, please. So to date, we can say that all remediation objectives have been met in line with the environmental impact statement and designed predictions. Minor to no erosion on the tailings cover. The cover is stable with minimal signs of erosion even on the edges. And vegetation recovery is on successful pathway. Next slide, please. What is most important to my view is that since 2022, we have occasionally observed small fish in Mirror Lake. And last summer, a professional team from SLR Consulting conducted a fish survey and confirmed abundant population of white sucker and minnows in Mirror Lake, which was completely leafless and, well, effectively dead in the previous 60 years. This was a welcome surprise for us that the fish can repopulate the lake so quickly. And such rapid recovery of lake ecosystem was not expected. So the fish tissue results showed only trace concentration of metals comparable to those measured in regional reference water bodies. And next slide, please. Also, rich terrestrial and wetland ecosystems are now developing on the tailings cover. So finally, instead of a dusty radioactive sand beach, the area has transformed into natural habitats that support diverse wildlife. So all of the photos were taken on site in the last 10 years. So, and of course, we have much more photos and observations of other of presence of our valued ecosystem components and species like beavers, muskrats, otters, and minks, and as well as numerous wolf and bird tracks on the tailings cover. Next slide, and I think Sky will follow the presentation.
Thanks, Alexi. Yeah, so strategies for engagement and inclusion in phase 3. Again, the core pieces stayed the same, but our focus shifted as activity. So all the remediation activity, it was, I mean, we filled a decent part of all the rental houses in Uranium City. There was lots of activity going on. And when there was activity, there was a lot of interest, both just curiosity and interest in opportunities and whatnot. And as the activity and interest, or as the activity reduced, the interest in the project has reduced a little bit. So SRC's efforts went into maintaining the local engagement. One small example, just to kind of get people to continue to go to the site and see how the remediation and the revegetation was progressing, was to run a reoccurring photo competition at the site where we would have a winner and draw prizes. And but what it did is it encouraged people to go and look at the site and kind of really specifically look and see how the plants were doing and if they saw any animals. And it was really fun to see what people sent in. We also, we've been working with Yathanene for a little while, 4 or 5 years or so. And they have a land technician program where they hire locals from the Athabasca Basin. And we've been working with them on site inspections for the last few years. Some site inspections with just our team where we're doing environmental monitoring and inspections, and some where we have a regulatory inspection and we'll invite the land technician to come and listen to the questions the regulators ask and our responses. We still do leadership tours and we still do our annual community tour, but the shift for the tour focus when we go into the communities in phase 3 now, we still bring the main team and we bring regulators, but we've also started bringing the Ministry of Energy and Resources, because we started getting a lot more questions around the institutional control program, because we would tell people that that's where the program or the project would end up. So it was helpful to bring the Ministry of Energy and Resources so they could speak to the program and answer those questions. The actual things that we focused on discussing during phase 3, or we're currently in phase 3, are things that, like Alexi had just brought up, the monitoring results, what we're finding, what the site looks like, and a reminder that this will shift into the ICP program, and a request for any input the community has, giving lots of time before we do apply for ICP. And there's multiple ways to include Indigenous traditional knowledge in phase 3. I just spoke with the land technicians, so if there's locally available monitors in the area, it's really great. It decreases monitoring costs. You don't have to fly people in from other areas, and you can also you have the added benefit that those people are experts in that region. The locals also more easily can monitor changes over time. They're in and around the area more. Lorado Mill, I don't think we mentioned, has a highway that runs through a section of the tailings cover, which was an interesting challenge throughout the whole project, but it has, it allows people to pass through the site. So people do see the site and they see the changes over time, and they let us know if there's something good or something concerning, or they have a question, those kind of things. Yeah, and locals can typically become the site knowledge keepers. They have been already, and now they have maybe worked on a remediation project, so they know what happened and where things were, and yeah, become the repository of more knowledge over time, specifically of the remediation, but also just the region from before. So next step for Laredo, we will continue engaging and including the Athabasca Basin communities as much as we can, and we will complete our phase 3 monitoring and maintenance activities. We plan on submitting the ICP package in the next year or two to the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission and the Ministry of Environment, and hopefully obtain approval from those regulators and transition the site into the institutional control program. And that is our presentation. If anyone has any questions, we would be happy to answer.
Great. Sorry, it took my camera a second to turn on. So thank you very much, Sky and Alexi, for that interesting presentation. Just a reminder to our attendees, if you have questions about SRC's approach to remediation and Indigenous engagement, type them into the question box in your GoToWebinar control panel. Okay, we have a few questions here. The first question is, was there gamma rays occurring naturally and measured at baseline studies before the mine, at surface and ground level, of course? Do either of you know that?
Yeah. I'll give that question to you.
Yeah. So, well, I don't think so, because mining, well, the mine, well, it was not mine, it was mill, first of all. So, and the mill operated in the 50s and early 60s. So that time, I think, well, there were no specific pre-operational survey, radiation survey or monitoring, as far as I know. But we had a lot of measurements in the neighboring areas which were not affected by mining or milling. So we have a lot of data about the background radiation in the region and in the local areas. So that's why we know very well about it, and it's about, and I think it was like that, it was about 0.15, maximum 0.2 on the average. I mean, microsieverts per hour.
Okay, thank you. Okay, my next question is, what elements of this engagement approach are most transferable to other remediation projects or industries, and what would need to be adapted?
That's an interesting question. I think that I mean, for any type of project or industry, building that kind of core toolkit and methodology and strategy, well, toolkit and methodology around the core engagement and inclusion options, and then looking at that frequently with your full team of experts, with everyone's opinions, and asking the communities, involving the communities, asking them what they think would be useful for strategy. So I think the methodology and the tools could stay fairly consistent throughout time. You might modify them a little bit, but something that you could take is the reminder to consider and adjust your strategy as things change on your project or your operations, and make sure that you're not just working out of a bubble of one or two, but really asking your team, asking anyone involved in the project, and definitely including and asking the communities what they would like to see and what they think about it, and potentially including them in the process if you can.
Interesting. Okay, next question. Are there publications or reports about this work that are available to the public?
Lexi, I think we did something with the revegetation trials.
Yep. Yeah, well, I think we have a number of publications about the project cleans, different sub-projects within the project cleans. Well, probably there should be some proceedings of the conferences where we presented it.
Yeah, and we do post. It's not publications, but we do post community videos every year that give an overview of what was done at the site the previous year, what we anticipate doing next year. So those are available on YouTube, and we also have a website. You can go to SRC's website, and there's a Project Cleans specific page within there where you can go and look for things like that.
Great. How do you adapt engagement strategies when Indigenous communities are internally diverse with multiple groups or traditional authorities?
Can you repeat the question one more time?
How do you adapt engagement strategies when Indigenous communities are internally diverse with multiple groups or traditional authorities? I'm guessing he means like competing interests within the communities.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and it's going to exist probably for every single project or initiative anywhere in Canada. You're never going to get just kind of one holistic view. Every community is different, and the communities don't all have the same opinion within that community. And there's different groups within the community that have different perspectives as well. So what we try and do is a diverse, so back to the kind of engagement tools that we've used. Everyone's on social media now, so we try and get into the community's Facebook pages so we can post, and often they'll see things and advertise that we are holding a meeting and anyone's welcome to come. We don't just hold, sometimes we'll hold specific meetings where it's just chief and council or something like that, but most community meetings, it's anybody. We often get school kids, we get kind of whoever wants to show up. We have a barbecue and we try and answer any questions that are on anybody's mind about anything related to the project, and sometimes just discussions about anything else. And ideally that allows people who are interested in coming, be it like some of the leaders or a business owner or someone thinking about buying some piece of equipment, or a person in high school who's thinking about what they might want to do in the future and what kind of long-term opportunities there are. Someone who just has a question about like regional, I don't know, berries health or something, because we bring up regulators who can sometimes answer those questions when we can't. So just the open invitation to kind of bring in anybody. And then we also have radio ads and newspaper, or not newspapers, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the name, kind of like a newsletter, a newsletter. We try and think about how people gather information and like different types of people. And then obviously we have people's phone numbers. If they're part of the band or the chief and council, we connect with them. And yeah, we will host workshops with specific focuses with specific people, but we try and just open it up. And actually adapting strategy, you are never, ever going to make anyone happy. It doesn't matter where you are in this planet. So you kind of try your best. And back when I was talking about our strategy around engagement and inclusion in phase 1, I mentioned kind of outlining the project objectives and setting expectations. And that helps make sure people understand we're not going to be coming in, like SRC is not a mining company. We don't have that much money behind us. We're not going to be there forever. We are here to clean the site up. So there's limited opportunity related to that. So we're trying to set reasonable expectations so we don't disappoint people or set their hopes too high, but we can achieve what's possible. And we're always interested in ideas because we've incorporated a lot of those throughout the project that have made it insanely successful. And it's only because of the input and the participation with the communities that we've been able to have this success. So we really appreciate it. I don't know if I fully answered that question, but it's an interesting one.
Okay, I have this question in a few different versions. So, how do you plan to adapt management strategies if conditions change over time, for example, due to climate impacts on the cover system or the ecosystem recovery?
Alexi, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, our design considers potential climate results of the climate changes. Also, there are a lot of uncertainty about it, but the design includes these items. So that's the first. And second, well, of course, the current monitoring results for the last 10 years do not show any unexpected events. Also, when we will transfer the site into the institutional control program, the program itself will anticipate potential changes due to climate change and maybe other unexpected, and the so-called adaptive management program will be included in the institutional control program and I believe it will can include some potential more or less likely scenarios related to the unexpected. Well, expect the unexpected is a difficult task, of course, but it will include several scenarios, maybe most likely of the least expected events. So that's it.
Okay, just following on that, how do you ensure Indigenous engagement continues after the mine closure and the rehabilitation certificate is issued, and now you're on to the program?
So you mean like once it's moved into the institutional control program?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, at that point, SRC can't ensure anything specifically because we're no longer involved in the project. But what we do know is that the Ministry of Energy and Resources has, I don't think we've touched on this, but when you apply to move a project or a site into the institutional control program, you have to provide a bucket of money along with it that gets invested to grow over time. And it's kind of like insurance. If there's 300 sites that move into ICP and each one contributes money towards long-term monitoring and maintenance requirements, the odds of each one of them needing all of it is low. It'll grow over time, and they can use that invested money to deal with the sites. So say one gets some really, really odd flood or something, they can go and they can repair the cover or something like that. And the Ministry of Energy and Resources also, as part of the calculation, because there's a full calculation that determines how much each site needs to contribute. It's related to the site features and what things will cost and how long we anticipate they'll be. It's related to like the engineering design and what the engineers recommend and those kind of things. But yeah, each calculation for each site also includes an engagement cost. So they've recognized that it will cost, they have to fly people up and stay overnight in hotels and spend time in the communities and make sure the community members still have an understanding of what's going on at those sites and they don't just kind of disappear. So in the ICP program, there's part of the calculation is related to engagement, and that will ensure that communities will be able to know what's happening, see results, have report access. Potentially, I don't know all the details, but that's my understanding from what the ICP program will look like for the sites.
Good. Okay. Thank you. It looks like we've run out of time. Any questions that we were unable to get to during the webinar will be forwarded to Sky and Alexi to respond to. Thank you, Sky and Alexi, for that really interesting presentation. I'd like to thank all of our attendees and ask that you please fill out the short survey that pops up on your screen at the close of the webinar. A link to the video recording of this webinar will be emailed to you tomorrow. For more online presentations like this one, visit the CIM calendar of events on cim.org. We look forward to seeing you at our next Solutions Exchange webinar. Thank you very much and have a good afternoon.
Thank you.